Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about a concept that I find is evident in every human being's experiential dimension, experiential awareness. I want to speak about the simultaneity of lower dimensional action and higher dimensional being. And what does that mean? A very straightforward example is that as these birds are moving, imagine this picture, the birds were moving, you know, having their pool party. And as we're watching these birds, it's as if we are a higher dimensional static being that is aware of lesser dimensional movement, non-static action. So the simultaneity between dimensions, the ability of man to not just see two different worlds, but to see a bridge in between. And I find as creatures that use language upon the surface of this earth, we in some sense can say language is the bridge between the outer earth and the inner earth. How our external perception of reality is space oriented and it is phenomenology in awareness. You see, I consider that we have been under the impression the human being's intelligence is all in one place. What if it is in some sense fragmented through a sort of multidimensionality where beyond the color spectrum, beyond the frequency of like people can't see Wi-Fi waves, but they can see many other things. So that means we have a range of access to the perception of reality. And if we, like the ancients, considered a sort of ultimate, I mean, the ancients considered soul mind dualism. Let me tell you like this, like certain traditions, they've considered only the mind and the body. They've made the body the known factor, they've made the mind the unknown factor. Certain traditions realized the body was a projection of a mind, so in their inquiry, it was just soul and mind. They didn't think there were bodies anymore, you know? I find that human intelligence is an oscillation between dimensions. Dimensions where the density of self existence is different. As if in one dimension yourself is so objective you cannot ignore it, it's just there. And in some dimension yourself is so subjective that it's as if at most it can be ascribed to the awareness of the self. It's as if like your conscious mind is a spaceship, your unconscious mind is space, your subconscious mind is the intention for the conscious mind to move. This is one thing that is very a profound topic of discussion until the end of time. I feel it is an engaging conversation, philosophical point that is the simulation endless, endlessly full, or is the simulation hollow? When I was younger, life was something to hold on to. Life was something to try to grab as quickly as possible. But then I realized there's luxuries that surpass physical accumulation. Sometimes how you're aware of existence happening is a very blessed experience. Sometimes I can say in this life there's been moments where I've learned from the action. Let's say I've done something and then it was a mistake, and then the mistake was being like the only reason I knew it was a mistake because there was a dimension where I could have not done that action. And so that's my perception, that just like how we are like sitting here looking at the picture of these birds, if this was like a video of the birds, we would see that the live video, these birds wouldn't know the higher static dimensions that are aware of them, you know So what that means is minds are all in the same existential field, yet they are close to each other experientially to be administered individually. And when a time comes in our species where minds integrate, that would be a moment in history where the species has had the willingness to move beyond individual consciousness, between an individual relationship of self and world. Robert M. Persig, he says that it's as if like we take a handful of sand from this endless shore, this endless beach, and we call that our awareness. That everything, like right now, even I'm speaking to you, I am a certain range. I am a certain antenna, and every living being is a certain antenna based on the sands they have held in their hand. On one level, you got to look at life and be like, all right, it changes. What am I going to do? It's like whatever I say, it changes. And then there's another dimension of life where before it changes, the phenomena has a self value, has a innate value. Some things, it's like, how can I tell you? Imagine you're a bird. Like, I'm going to create an epic story right now. Let's say there's a world of birds, and these birds have been by a bird dictator. The bird dictator emperor has come, the bird emperor has come, and the bird emperor says that birds are not allowed to fly into the sky. Imagine this emperor comes and says birds. So many generations of birds are being born that never fly. Flying has become illegal for birds in this bird universe with this bird emperor. Now, one day, one of the birds, it's like, then why do we have wings? There comes this philosophical debate in the society of these birds. Entertain this for a second. Just a second, guys. Sorry, guys, I gotta run. I'll be right back. Hang in there. I'll finish the birds. Okay, okay. I am terribly sorry to the listeners. There was something I had to do, um, just out of the blue. So, anyways, I'm back. Okay, so I was sharing this story. Let's say, just like the Buddha gives a silent sermon. In the intermission, I was giving a sort of silent, you know. But anyways, so this bird emperor, I was saying this bird emperor who's denied all the birds for many generations, for many centuries not to fly, eventually there will be a bird, there comes a bird that wonders, why are we not meant to fly? Why do we have wings if we're not meant to fly? And then the being, it's another suggestion that the human being breaks the shell of the cultural program, the social program, the external programs by wondering why there is the presence of the inner intelligence, the inner realm. So we are kind of right now like that bird civilization where the birds are not allowed to fly. The same way, let me tell you how there's a similarity between the metaphor. The same way the bird is not allowed to fly, it's the same way the human being is not allowed to acknowledge their mind. When I say they're not allowed, that means you are allowed, but it's not collectively agreed upon. So it's as if this was a very interesting point about political science and especially democracy. That is democracy really freedom, or is it just the majority's vote? You know, that means to wonder about a political system where no one is left behind is to some degree impossible. There will always be multiple factors in the moment. So the human being has to wonder how the mind flies and why the mind is here and why there is even the concept of a mind. Why in the dictionary we have that definition. Because there's the administration of visible phenomenology and invisible phenomenology. The invisible phenomenology is like where your imagination lives. Right now, everything I'm saying has an inner image like existence behind my eyes. And by the way, guys, I don't know how to share this with the listeners. Like, these are live streams, so feel free to like challenge, dive into the concept, and share your views. These ideas have pilgrimaged into my mind for this moment. I there has been times where I wondered if life was perfect, what would be the motivation? If I had everything I wanted, how could the concept of wanting exist? If I was everything I needed to be, in some sense, how would the concept of change have a value? And this idea can go so deep where one eventually begins to question, all right, let's say reality is a coin flip, and there's a chance that the intelligence is purely temporal, or the roots of the intelligence are temporary, or they are eternal. Eternal means timeless, means that the intelligence is rooted beyond the dimension of time. Or as Plato even says so majestically, he says, time is the moving image of eternity. What appears as limited time, appears as eternity. So we can actually very profoundly say that time is a dimension above eternity. You know, usually people think eternity is beyond time, but I feel it can be considered that when we reverse engineer back into the conception of time, are acquainted with the witness in the void. So, Ivan, in the chat section, when you say infinite stillness flowing shapelessly defined, wording the unwordable with formless shape, that formlessness is not the fact that there's nothing in the space. It's just that there is a momentum, there is a speed to manifestation. So imagine cause and effect happening so quick that there is no time. Imagine an effect of a cause that is not in time. There is a simultaneity. You know, it's like Venn diagrams between the dimensions, and the middle area is where language is occurring. There are many ways the intelligence of our moment occurs. Now, here's the cool thing, that when I say the nature of language is evocational, it's a dualistic technology, and that we are the users of the technology of language. We're not the language itself. Anytime the human being has put themselves in a character in a story, they have colored in a moment that is colorless. That is like, it's as if glass has gone on a certain color. When you realize how much of the actual real physical environment is being a part of your imagination, there comes this kind of double-edged sword mindset where the person's like, is reality given imagination, or is imagination sort of what is given in reality? That means when you look at the child and when you wonder about human beings and their creative potential has to do with how far they are actually looking into the moment and they're administering it consciously. Consciousness is the major development of our species. That means the purpose of all life is to be conscious and to be conscious now. You know, and that sense of now is very supreme, because it is the same now in the word nowhere. When you look at the word nowhere, if you put a space between the W and H, you're now here. So when we look at what is now here, we're also noticing this now here is a sense of nowhere. When we realize this sense of nowhere, it's another way of saying language is hollow, because the symbol attribution was the novelty in the moment. So what it means is that we are creatures that when we are static, still, and silent, we are not individually conscious. We are collectively present. When we animate, when we move, when we speak, when we decide, when choice, like this, lightning strike of Zeus, hits the earth, every decision has a certain echoes and surges through one's whole being. You know, there have been moments where I remember in my youth I did some things that were against my own nature. Not that they were even messed up, just things like, you see, we can say there are two kinds of bad things. There are things that are bad based on your inner realm, and there are things that are bad externally. You know, for example, if you see life has taken 4 billion years to evolve, being violent is by far the stupidest thing. It is excuse my language, but it is the pure idiocy to turn off a light that took 4 billion years to turn on. And so really what the value of the mind is, it is a candle, and the suffering of the world are these savage winds, and it is only the hand of humanity that must protect the light of its own consciousness. It is only your external reality that is like the gloves of the soul. And so the world, it makes sense. When you look at history, what has it been? It's been like a state of potential energy becoming kinetic over a very vast time. Another way of saying that there has been temperature going on since the Big Bang, temperature games. And so another way we can say, the same way manifestation is cool, is crystallizing into form, is another way of saying temperature of the cosmic space is shifting. And so temperature even is a very crucial comprehension, because if I asked you what is your emotion, and you as a person wondered about how the sort sense of good and emotions developed, you will see it's like the first duality that the young child is exposed to is of temperature. The child is not born with the knowledge of a rocket scientist. The child just knows what is warm, what is cold. It goes towards that which is innately a rhythm of its survival. And when you go towards the melodies of your survival, karma's doors automatically open because you have walked into the right neighborhood of your own conscience. There's many things, as any moment a person sees success in one dimension, they can see failure in another. It is only a sort of, I call it the crystal responsible mind, a mind that has crystallized into the purity of the origin of its free will. Like right now, I can't ask the earth to turn the other way, the planet to turn the other way, but I see I can turn my own head. So what does that mean? That means I can turn, my inner realm can shift much more easily than the outer realm. This is why the free wills this is why the free will's task is to adjust. That survival of the fittest, that adaptation that our species required, it wasn't the external world adapting to the person. It was the inner realm of the person adapting. The fact that human beings, before the agricultural age, were just moving around. They were roaming the earth. And it was until that they decided, I will sit and I will stand in this land and I will make farms that will feed my species, that efforts and advancement came. And it is always, always some of the most majestic things in life. They are an inner, I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't want to kind of like emphasize the concept of sacrifice, but in a changing universe, it's as if reference points are being sacrificed for the new reference points. I remember when I was young and I would get scolded by, for example, my parents or those older than me when I did something wrong. But I remember there came a time where I was scolded by my intuition, and that scolding is heavy. That scolding is as if like a marathon runner had to run a short sprint and could totally do it, but was distracted and didn't. There is a regret of the soul that it knew how to manifest and it didn't, and that regret is something that if the person simplifies their life and allows it to be more centered towards a simplistic honesty, sincerity, I am telling you that your inner realms require your attention to the external nature's, believe it or not, decency. Anytime you lose sight of your decency, karma can push you around. Now, this doesn't mean every human being has a normal state of perception. It just means that we have to recognize that based on the steps every human being has taken, their inner realms have taken shape. When I look at these birds, and when I look at human civilization, I ask myself what is different. And I see these birds don't know English, they don't know Farsi, they don't know Japanese, they don't know how to speak Russian, you know? And so these birds are speaking the language of the ecosystem being the common value. When we are a creature in nature, nature is the movement of your imagination. That means this is why we have sort of natural gazes, natural impulses towards a simpler time when the world becomes too complex to handle. So this is pretty much Mr. Within is hypothesizing that our imagination was nature. And in our separation from nature, we became responsible for what nature used to move for us. Man is a unique creature because he became conscious that he was not the environment only. And there's many things. I am, you see, in some angles, I look at myself and I'm like, good job. But in some angles, I look at myself and I cannot ignore the shadow that the light of my vision is creating. Every form on this earth, especially in the presence of light, has a shadow. That means the moment you are a human being, that you can have the potential to do something good, the shadow becomes the opposite. You know, for a long time, I looked at life and I'm like, even as a kid, and I'm like, what is this symmetry? What is this symmetry that is like the left hand and the right hand and the left part of the face and the right part of the face? And it was this very strange vision that it's as if there is a central plane. Imagine imagine you went inside a portal halfway, and your left part of your face was on one side of the portal and the right part of your face was on another side of the portal. Then you would in that moment be seeing both sides, both worlds at once. And so that means in the middle of man, there is a plane where duality emerges. And I feel this is the reality. I feel our minds are planes in a vaster plane. And so our relationship is going to be one similar to that which was found with instruments, the great musicians of the world. They saw the secret, you know. I believe it was Confucius or Lao Tzu, one of these guys. He said, music in the soul can be heard by the entire universe. And then there was Ludwig von Beethoven, where he said, don't just practice your art, but force your way into its secrets. For it and knowledge can raise man to the divine. And his implication, what he was saying there, was that you are a temporary being, and there will come certain moments in your life where you will see a glow to the moment, a calling. Something in the cosmos is saying, come forth. And when you trust that, when you force your way into the secrets of the art, that the living artwork that is your moment, it will raise man to the divine. For the greatest effort expressed on this planet will not go unseen by the eyes of higher dimensions. It's all being seen. It's all being watched by the memory of a universe that was alive, but when we look at it, it is emptiness to the limited fathomability of our perception. We are one sand in the hourglass of the cosmos, and we are claiming we know. And I am telling you, it is not man that knows. Man exists in a world that is instantaneously knowing its existence. It is only man who has designed language and has separated his experience into a world inside a world. We created our own inception. The moment, like fire, language was birthed on this plane. And then the realms of man were transformed forever. The mystery stands. The mystery stands. Regardless of how advanced the use of language is, there is a mystery beyond language. As much as we have philosophers, you know, and let's say ethical experts, I consider that as much as there is morality, similar to the writings of Paul Dirac, I believe there is anti-morality, like antimatter. And anti-morality is simply the observer's position acknowledged before what the content in the observance. Reality, or let me say it like this, what if reality doesn't have walls, doesn't have edges? What if the the only illusion was that there was an illusion. I don't know what it was, but at some point I noticed that many things that people suffer, many things that are causing anxiety and stress in the attention of the mysterious human biomechanism, your inner realms are temporary unless communicated. And the biggest reason for communication comes why? Because I am telling you, the way I see, especially I mean, my statements may appear bold here, but I mean them with a compassionate regard. When I look at Canadian culture, for example, as I go on walks in downtown Toronto, when I have engaged various groups of people, of course, I'm one man in a universe of a billion trillion stars, and I have a certain range of perception. But what I have noticed is that human decency is being lost in costume games because we want to get high on our moments. What do I mean by that? That means desire is a multidimensional concept. This is why the moment the concept of the subconscious was introduced, the moment that Carl Jung was considering and wondering about the unconscious, and the Freudian thinkers, they in some sense began to realize that the complexity of the phenomena is not kept in one dimension, yet multiple dimensions. So what does that mean? That means when Carl Jung spoke about the collective unconscious, he was saying, in other words, it's not just what we know that is here, we don't know that is also in common. That means humanity has a strange bond in the awareness of non-existence. Other animals, other species don't have this. Only the human being has it. Because the human being is aware of its potential absence. When you are aware of mortality, when you're aware of how something is here and it cannot be, the cannot be potential of phenomena is shared by all beings. So what does that mean? That means what you know can also be in common with what others know, or but what you don't know is always in common with what others don't know. Man has made a wall, made a door between the visible and the invisible, and that door is the animate movement of language in the mind of man. You know, there was a time I poetically saw the soul being an ink for the mind, which is the pen. And the experience of life is like what is being written on this page that is the moment. Ultimately, this is, I find, the superior dimensions of knowledge and the educational system, which hasn't been acknowledged. That means the educational system for me is 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 turning young minds into old men, and there's a error. There is an error in the educational system that it is asking you. A proper educational system of an advanced civilization will be a resource. Ultimately it would just be a resource, and the wonder of the human beings about where they are in the world is the inspiration for their knowledge. That means things that are true in the inner motivations, they can't be rejected by the outer. Do you know, in 2014 when I started these talks, so many people were like, what are you doing? There was a lot of I don't want to say there was a lot, but there was a couple people who were questioning, like I automatically became uncommon. It was like, any big project attempted makes you uncommon, I think, because it is a behavioral difference than the status quo. Anything new, anything you do new is going to be weird to those who haven't seen the new. Imagine somebody gave Steve Jobs an Apple, or let's say, I mean, this is definitely not true, but I'm just making a playful story here. Imagine like a parallel reality dimension of Steve Jobs and like a parallel reality. When he was young, he stole an apple, and then the owner came and scolded him, and he said, "Kid, you'll never be anything. You're stealing. You're worthless. That's why you see no worth in, for example, paying for something." And then Steve Jobs, like the little version of Steve Jobs who attempted to steal the apple, he's there. And then the last thing that little version of Steve Jobs hears is that you will not amount to anything, something like that. An incredible invalidity of the child's effort. That means I am telling you, you got to be careful. The sooner you realize you're not a creature of thought, the less you get hurt by thought throughout the day. The less communication bothers you. It's just an appearance throughout the day, you know? And so Steve Jobs saw that apple, and the guy gave the apple to Steve Jobs here, and he just invalidated the little kid, but still gave the apple. And Steve Jobs held that apple and smashed it to the ground, and he's like, "I'll show you." And then the grandson of those kids were holding an apple, apple phone. So if I was on an island, if like let me say it like this, if there was no other human being on this planet, most likely I would identify with silence. I wouldn't be a personality. But whenever there is society, there's civilization, there must come a personally motivated effort to be something in the moment. And that's the most crucial thing. Underneath all the intellectual capability and correction that we can bring to the civilization, there is underneath a requirement for emotional stability. And emotional stability is not a rational process because it involves how behind the eyes of the person, not just one sense of self, but they're remembering other moments of their life, and all those moments are coagulating. So it's another way of saying the person's attention is getting caught to the fragmentation of the inner realms. That means if you notice, sometimes when I share these talks, when my inner realms move at a certain speed, I can't vocalize them. When they accelerate to a certain speed, I can't vocalize them. At most, I remain silent, and I just get taken by the rhythm of the subjective phenomena. It's kind of like an master, let's say, violin, master guitar player or a pianist. You know, it's as if they're playing this melody. Imagine that master guitar player or sitar player is playing that melody, and for a moment, the action becomes observed by the whole moment, which is the state of mind. What that means is you are witnessing your effect as the cause of it. That's the simultaneity. That means this is why man cannot be aware, the effect cannot comprehend the cause, but the cause always sees what it has made put into effect. So if you kind of like this is, you can say that pretty much religion is unknown cause to known effect. I consider science is known cause to unknown effect, and that's it. That's the whole war. We're fighting over which came first, the known or the unknown. If the unknown came first, language is hollow. If the known came first, language is not hollow. There is something you can do. I feel there's a simultaneity of both. I feel just like you have two eyes, that see the same, we have a subjective constitution of our existence and an objective constitution of our existence that are written on the same existential paper. That means we are experiencing multidimensionality in the existence of a singular dimension. We are world harbors. We carry worlds behind our eyes, and these worlds as Chung Tzu would so beautifully say, the Zen master, that all your thoughts, all your beliefs, dear human being, they are like leaves on a tree, and as the seasons pass, some leaves will fall, they will change in texture, and you will look at your face after many years in the mirror and wonder if you're still the same. And so, just like our clothing changes, it's like the elemental constitution of our being changes. I mean, there's no way I can say I am the same person as years ago, but at the same time, I find myself having access to those memories. And when I wonder who I am, I find that I am no one other than a pilot of my experience. Where my attention goes, the world is authorized to happen. And when the world is authorized to happen, the inner realms are authorized to happen. So it's the precursor of externality being confronted first, and then any sort of deviation or transformation of the individual into the multidimensional. That means human beings, you physically, you have to learn how to walk, but multidimensionally, you got to learn to so you have to pilot your mind multidimensionally. It's like you have to pilot your experience multidimensionally, but you have to pilot your existence in a singular dimension, and all of it is held in the void that is the mystery of space. What an incredible question. So, guys, in the chat section, AP, Arrogant Prophet, has asked a question that I never thought anybody would ask. So, I am so shocked that you have asked that. So, thanks for asking that, and I will give you an honest answer. Have I ever seen myself in spirit form? I have seen, let me say it like this. If I consider that my mind is changing, the states of mind are changing, I can tell you there is a part of my being that has no shape, no history, and no time. So that is not something you can see. It is the seer. It is the unchanging seer. But, okay, let me say it like this. I'll answer it in the way that this man named Almas answered, but I'll tell you my answer. In this show called Buddha at the Gas Pump, I think the guy's name was Richard Parker. He was interviewing this guy named Almas, and he asked this guy about his history, and Almas, this man in the interview, the Skype interview, he looked at him and he said, my history, there's three parts to my history. There's a part of me that has no history. There's a part of me that is my universal history. And then there's a part of me that is my individual history. And then he asks the interviewer, which one would you like to know? It's a very fascinating statement, because what he's saying there is that there are various states of mind where I have seen an image to self, but I have also realized that awareness is not image based. So I have been acquainted with that part of me that has no history. Pretty much after 2011, I became acquainted with that. You know, um, then there's a part of me which was my universal history, which I was rejecting. And I still don't even engage it that much. But certain random incidents that occur when you don't want something and it comes to you, then there is something about experience that is, I don't want to say predestined, but you can't ignore the storm that has come to your door. So there has been, and I'll give you answers in these three dimensions. In regards to my individual form, that history is obvious, but I've had certain moments. I don't remember the date, but I think it was maybe 2014. But I wasn't in UK, I was in Canada. I was sitting by a fireplace, and it was at night in my backyard, and my brother and my friends were over, and we were sitting around this fire. And as we were sitting there, I found myself going into this strange, simple peacefulness. And I don't know what it was. It was as if my physical eyes were not looking for anything, so the eyes of my mind was moving. And in that moment, I saw that it's like, let me tell you something interesting. The moment you see yourself as a shape in certain states of mind, that shape can infinitely echo. When it infinitely echoes, you realize you're not one image, you're a collection of images. That's the universal history. The individual history is that you think you are one image, you know? So the universal history in that moment, let me tell you, okay, I'll share. Like, I saw underneath my skin, not underneath my skin, as if I saw my body simultaneously in another dimension, and it wasn't this color. It was this starlight kind of glow of a skin, and there was a sort of strange face. It was as if like the face. I don't know what it is, but energy right now in the human form needs to identify itself. But there are certain states that the being is not defined by where it is born, but how various rhythms of energy are keeping it. So what I mean by that is that the appearance of myself in my inner realms has been like a stethoscope. Sorry, not stethoscope. What's the term? No, not stethoscope. What is the term? Um, oh my God, kaleidoscope. There we go. It's been like a kaleidoscope. Stethoscope. Kaleidoscope. Okay, so I have seen a kaleidoscope of various images. As if like imagine every atom held with itself the memory of a lifetime. And then the constitution of the being is the unity of, it's like there's a citizenship of various archetypes in your mind. So that was one moment. I had an experience of a self in another location, in the simultaneous location, but I was not a sensory color. Like it wasn't the same colors of my skin. There was a dimensional sensitivity. Yeah, it's with a K. AP. I think it's like this kaleidoscope. There's an I missing in there, but you know. So that was one time. Another time was in a dream. Oh no, no, there is no. So AP, when you say in that moment, have you felt disconnect from it? There is no dis. You see, there's a strange obsession to become constantly characters in a story. When that urge leaves you, when that obsession of seeing a certain self in every moment goes, you automatically see what you are before you do anything. It's a Tao Te Ching kind of style thing. It's like the Tao that Lao Tzu spoke about. It was the action through inaction, and the action through inaction is realizing there's something moving before you are. Because the universal history doesn't have a face. It's faced. It's like it's like a center of a circle. There's so many degrees of accessing it. You know. So what it means is like if we take into consideration Heraclitus's "No man steps in the same river twice," and it's not the same man and it's not the same river statement. It's going to be a sense that every moment has its own unique crystal accessed history. So what I mean by that is there's a changing geometry. You're actually living geometry in higher dimensions, but we don't see it now like that. There's a way you can see all human beings that they are pure geometry. Everything is geometric. It's just we don't notice it. Uh, consciousness is geometry, is acknowledgement of shape. So there was no disconnection. Ultimately, your that sense of you that has no history, which is pure awareness, which is your presence, is watching your personality shift in the light of being. So I'm saying even though if I see an image to myself in my inner realms, I don't go like, oh, that's me, yeah. Let me update my about section of my Facebook. Let me update my resume. I saw myself as some celestial glow. You see, you gotta respect thought, or you will miss out on the nature of its livelihood. Anytime a person wants too much from a moment, they cut, they limit the flows of authenticity that the minds can provide in the moment. Anytime a person is too faster than their moment, the moment acts slower towards them. I don't know why, but it's just probably overwhelming. Now, AP, I'm going to give another answer to your chat section. Have I seen myself in spirit form? I'll tell you this. I had a dream that revolutionized my life. I think it was in 2013 I had this dream. 12, 13, somewhere through there. This dream became the biggest mystery of my life and totally shifted maybe a huge percentage of my attention towards my inner realms. And so I had this dream where I find myself in this strange sleep paralysis where I'm awake. It's like the morning, and I see my body in my bed, but I'm awake in my bed and my body is asleep. Like I can't move my body, and I'm not even resisting to move it. I'm not even insisting to move it. I'm just hovering. It's as if my mind has woken up earlier than my body in the morning. And then I remember I hear a word. This had never happened to me in a dream. I heard an exact word where the moment I heard it, I knew the spelling. And the word was L-I space D-A-H, Lida, you know? And I remember hearing this word in that kind of semi-conscious state and saying it instantly. It was as if I was my behavior was under a program of knowing that was not in my conscious mind. And when I say that term, I get this instant, I can't even give it a verb because it was just this instant shift, as if like there was this instant projection. And in that instant, there was an instant back and forth. I don't know how to say it. Like as if my attention got shooted out of the ceiling, but then it went to an unfathomable space. And then there were certain memories. It was as if when I said that word from a semi-conscious state, I lifted into a dream state instantly. And in that state, I saw this giant this giant wall in space, like it appeared like a stone wall, and there was this inverted triangular cave. This inverted triangular cave that I was just hovering as an attention in that moment, and I knew there was a restriction. There's something strange about the dream state that there's innate knowing in the dream sometimes. So then I also see this snapshot image of this kind of being, what do you call it? This kind of being chained somewhere. Not chained, excuse me, not chained, just seated on some sort of strange chair. And I suddenly find myself coming. Just this was the consciousness retained. That I just remember as in that instant that I said the word, the whole thing was like maybe like a second. In 1 second, I saw all those images. It felt, and then as I was coming, my attention was coming down from the ceiling to my bed, to my sense of body. It was as if the ceiling was this strange cubic wave. I don't know how to say it. Imagine like your ceiling is just cubes, but these cubes that are kind of the surface of the ceiling was moving like water, but it was all cubes. I don't know how to say it, you know. And then I wake up, and when I wake up, it was like a wake up where as if I don't know. It's as if like the impact, as if I felt so instantly. I woke up that I just instantly, the moment I felt I woke up, I just stood up and I was just sitting on the side of my bed, my both hands on my kind of forehead, and just wondering what had just happened. And I had felt this strange cleansing. It's as if I felt my soul had taken a shower, you know. My attention had something different about it. And it went later on, and that was the mystery, the word. Later on, there came meanings of what that word meant and certain synchronistic revelatory experiences of that, why I had that dream, you know. And believe it or not, it was that dream that led to me creating the concept of the pilots of consciousness, which is one of those major things I speak about. So I woke up, and for some years, hear me out here. For some years, I didn't have any opinion on that dream, and certain things were revealed about it. But then there came a time where my mind one night entertained an implication of that, and there was, I don't know, maybe like for 2 days, for 2 to 3 days, I was functioning under the impression in my inner realms that this whole world is a simulation from some sort of galactic state of imprisonment. I felt like as if it's like as if I felt my body is somewhere else. Who I am as a being is somewhere else, and this world is a holographic simulation of a being in a totally different way of existence, right? So, but then eventually, that self that has no history, my eyes began moving through that, and then my relationship with all imagery relaxed. So, right now, everything I told you about the imagery of those dream states of mind, they're not as important as the awareness to the self, because those are games of the self. Even galactic archetypes, which are civilization, hopefully, let's say in the span of 500 years, will get adopted, acquainted to. What does that mean? That means imagine the day where aliens are filing for citizenship on Earth. It would be for the first time the human psychology in all its history has to revolutionize its context of the acknowledgement of behavior. That means when aliens become citizens on our planet, imagine a world like that, it would psychologists and philosophers would be going nuts. They would be like, whoa, we have to now wonder about the incorporation and the implication of alien behavior and alien rights in human civilization. And so it would become, for the first time, a galacto-human civilization. And so what it means is the novelty. What enters your experience is the landscape you have to engage with. I find the major thing that animates my inner realms is just this simple acknowledgement that the world is alive before I was, and it's still alive as I'm speaking. That means you are hearing my voice, but if you were listening more closely, you would hear the voice of the cosmos everywhere. Yeah, let me tell you the cool thing about the mind. Imagine your mind is like this advanced instrument, and if you don't use it, some beings may be like, why does this being have this advanced mind and is not using it? You know, the mind is so sensitive, and the veil of thought is so ambiguous at times, that to think that this is called theosophy, by the way, AP. What you're speaking about is through a theosophical context, which means human beings were wondering about the existence of invisible entities in other dimensions. In other words, there was this huge, vast writing dedicated to this called the Invisible Helpers. And what it meant is it stretched from the concept of the logos of the ancient Greeks, that what we feel is an individual's mind is actually an antenna for this field that is conscious of itself. So, what that means is we have the body of human beings, but we have the mind of God, you know, the mind of an unfathomable collective witness of all moments. So I've heard many stories, and I don't know why It's like I didn't care for them much in my youth, but it's like sometimes life is so strange, you know. But that strangeness becomes a point of familiarity then in the future. Anyways, guys, everything I told you about the dream I had, I remember it was a dream, and a dream is an implication. It's pretty much how the tension from the external realm. It's a processing of tension of the external realm of the day before. I am teaching. Uh, something to people that is strangely like a mirror. I am pointing to a mirror in these talks. And I am pointing to a mirror that is not just external. That means you can go look in the mirror and you'll see your body. But if you wanted to see the mirror, like you wanted your mind to see itself in the mirror, that mirror is stillness and silence. Or it can be authentic advanced communication to the degree that you tap into the stillness and silence that way. That means you can reduce your speed and get enlightened, or you can increase your speed and get enlightened. Both are possible. My school of thought, where I speak about the pilots of consciousness, the advanced communicators, I have this very kind of, I'm walking a different crossroad than the ancient mystics. Because I am saying that regardless of if this world is an illusion or not, participation and an advanced level of awareness to communication will suddenly be the liberation beyond it. That means if you, the advanced communicator path leads towards the bodhisattva outcome, and the yogic path towards stillness and silence and less activity is the path of, I would say, the Buddha. It's kind of like hearing that saying where they say one man's treasure is another man's trash, or another man's trash is another man's treasure, or something like that. What it means is human beings are extracting different values from the same phenomena. And so to get acquainted with your inner realms, the greatest thing I found, and I will tell people what I think is better than a person trying to astral project and all that new age approach. I'm telling you, it does, like, you'll laugh when you realize the cosmos is moving within you, not without you. That the location and locations inside a location are ultimately an illusion because it's all one location. You know, it's like being acquainted and being able to treat yourself like a water, in a solid state, liquid state, and a gas state. A solid state would be pure matter. It's your objective realm. We can say a liquid state would be like mind, where it is semi-matter, semi-non-matter. Semi, you can say the linguistic realms, the subjective realms. Semi-matter, semi-thought. And then there's the gas state, which is pure thought. And when you realize all these, the system I've designed is that 0, 1 to infinity. These four symbols are implications of all the dimensions one requires to work with phenomenology of all sorts. Because whether you're in your outer realm or inner realm, the one thing that is really causing it to be real is the phenomenological movement. That means it's like man would look outside and like, let's say how a lion moves, or a saber-toothed tiger, not saber-toothed tiger, but how like a tiger would move, mountain lion would move. Now the same wilderness that you would watch externally, there's coming a need to watch it internally, to watch the wilderness of your mind. There's a strange joy. It's a non-tangible joy, but because you're conscious and present of it, it is a supreme bliss of the opportunity of existence to be conscious of itself. There's a bliss there. When you confront the void, when empty space, then comes ability to confront singular stuff in the space. Then the singular will evolve to the dualistic, which means there's coming a need to confront not just the void, not just singular stuff, but multiplicity, duality. And the moment you have duality, like you can say, the moment you have duality, the third dimension is infinite. The moment you have duality, you can create infinity. Duality is what is required before you can make infinity. So it's as if like the singular dimension of your intelligence, the one dimension, and the two dimension, they are observed from the zero dimension, therefore lead towards the infinite dimension. Pretty much the way the body moves is something in a world. The way the mind moves is a world in something. The mind is a world generator. Imagine your brain Its purpose is to receive phenomena and stabilize into some perception, into some perspective. Ultimately, all human beings are perception seekers. We're seeking to see more out of somewhere that we are. Now, how we go about seeing more is crucial, because with the Stoic wisdom that control your attitude or your attitude controls you, there was an important implication. For Stoics back in the day, it was behavior. Behavior was like the path towards heaven, you know, not belief. Belief is like a leaf on a tree. There's many of them around. It's systems, guys. Pretty much knowledge is oscillating between the known and the unknown, between the moving and the still. It's like the mind colors in, the eyes of the mind color in what the eyes of the body receive. So when I look at an object, even though light is hitting that object and then entering my eyes, and then there's some sort of brain activity, there is an observer to phenomena that must consider itself beyond the phenomena and able to move it. That means if me and you were inside this cup I see right now, we couldn't talk about moving the cup. We wouldn't even, it would be even hard to notice we're inside the cup, you know? So when we're stuck inside a box, you can't tell you if there's an outside. But when you're looking at the box from the outside, you can take off the box. And all of reality is subjective boxing. Yeah. Not like subjective boxing like Rocky style, but like we are boxing up our experiences and language and believing in them, only to realize that experiences has this endless sense to it. For me, I had to at some point enlist the pen into the service of my hand. And I had to begin writing my inner realms. Because the way the intelligence of the being is, let me tell you, our full intelligence. Interesting. The mind is an instrument that can uh, change the texture of how the world is being experienced. I don't know if many people have experienced this, but there's been times where my mind playfully has done something like, let me tell you, like the mind. Most people think that it's this is a strange thing to say, but most people think they are their mind, and it is true. But one can have a relationship where the mind is their friend. So what I mean by that is that you see, the mind of the person throughout civilization is fragmented in many ways. It's divided. The cultural conditioning even leads to the preference of imagery in the subjective realms. But for me, there has been moments where I have wanted nothing as a being. There was like this strange preferencelessness, in the moment. And then the mind has moved before I have commanded it. Before my conscious attention has navigated it, I've had moments where my mind has moved before I have. There are moments where your mind moves before your body, and there's moments where your body moves before your mind. When your body moves before your mind feels it is the whole moment. When your mind moves before your mind is claiming to be the body. It's like the body becomes a follower of the mind. You know, they say the mind is a lousy master but a great servant. And what that means is you have to get acquainted with this genetical, unique perception that you as a person are the only person who has access to your eyes. That means all these birds sitting at this fountain, even though they're at the same fountain, even though they may be looking at the same direction, but they are different birds by nature, and every bird has to discover the nature of its wings. And so I found out, like, you see birds when they want to fly from the nest, they are pushed off, and so we have to find a way to push people towards the wings of their mind opening. And the wings of their mind is a suggestion of an ability to witness various spectrums simultaneously. It's like our intelligence is this unique dance, and we're just as a species noticing this dance is going on. And as we're noticing this dance, we're trying to reverse engineer into why we're dancing in this way, only to realize that it's a collective rhythm, it's a collective melody. The music is how the world is moving. Mhm. On some level, it's funny. Regardless of what you hear, what belief system you get acquainted to, you can totally see how it's just a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and we have made nowhere into our home. And this is why I think there is ultimately an ability to confront the void in the being, in any being. That means fear exists as long as there's something to lose, but after all has been lost, what is there to lose? It's as if eternity realizes its steps were never mistaken, that it has redeemed itself by the realization that it is present. There's a story of Buddha. He goes and tries to find, before Buddha, we got to understand, like, Buddha was raised at a time where before him, a lot of the concept of meditation existed, but people were trapped in a sort of excuse me, into a sort of ceremonial Brahmanism. And so Buddha was seeing a lot of people tried a lot of weird ceremonial approaches towards sort of divine liberation. And so the path Buddha tries, one path that he tries many paths. You know, it's like great men tend to make great mistakes also. You know, and what happens is Buddha, he goes this path of asceticism, and he literally buys into the school of thought that he has to, as the being fasts and stops eating, and it goes towards like this state where they are physically like dying, then they see God. So it was this weird Brahmanism approach of harm to the body leading to supernatural wisdom, which was a flaw. It was like, this story I'm telling you is going to show you how much Buddha realized the error he made. And so Buddha finds himself going into this kind of inefficient school of thought, and he finds himself so weak, just sitting somewhere so weak, having not ate for so many days, that he has realized the mistake. It's as if his inner realms were ungrateful for what was given. And then there's the story is so incredible, because the moment he realizes this is not the path, that's when suddenly out of nowhere, this girl comes with a bowl of rice and puts it in front of Buddha and leaves as if mystery unknown. And Buddha eats that bowl of rice and comes back to life and gets out of that unnecessary cave. Life is not just a condition, it is an unconditional awareness to conditions. That is the joy, that our mind can see and move. I feel there's no such thing as the concept of laziness. I feel there's no such thing as procrastination. I feel there is just people who see something as important and people who don't. That's it. That's the difference. And when you find a path that is worth living for and you live for it, it may not be perfect. There's many things in life, like Salvador Dali says, don't fear perfection. You'll never reach it. You know, what it means is that there's always greater worlds to compare whatever we're experiencing to. And even if we can't see it, what do we see history has done? Man creates those greater worlds. Suddenly, people on earth began wondering how to get to heaven. You know, it's like trying to get to an airport that hasn't been built yet. The issue can be said that when a person lives just for their inner realms, just for themselves, it will be a total extinction. But if they live for that is which is beyond their perception, if they serve this the advancement of their civilization, it will be the only lack of regret before physical transition. Because regrets do find you at any moment of transition. Anytime the new comes, the past has to move out. I find one of the greatest abilities that can be found in this plane of existence is the fearlessness to see what the next is, what the new is, to permit novelty of voice in an ancient world. To allow modern mythology to like, let me tell you this, like ancient mythology, it's written. Modern mythology is unwritten, it is in the making. And so what that means is the way we live now will suggest the implications of how far we lived. And so the way what I want to see actually is strange, because I kind of like see everything that is going on in the world, and I'm like, when I look back 1,000 years, or like when I look back in time at the beginning of various nations, you see that they had settlers. And these settlers were pioneers, and for their time, they thought they were doing next level advanced shit, like building a house back in the day. Like, what animal in nature builds a house? They thought they were geniuses. But we who are in skyscrapers with Wi Fi, it's like, it's a situation where we who fly are in airplanes with Wi-Fi, like we have totally changed, And so I wonder that 1,000 years from the time we are alive now, how would the children of that future humanity look back and see their pioneers? And I thought we have the opportunity to give the impression to the future generations that we roared before extinction came close. We roared at extinction, and it took steps back. That we roared at the inefficiency of civilization, that the mind of the human being realized what it deserved was more important than what it desired. And it's your birthright as a human being to be able to experience an advancement of your civilization. That means when you look at the concept of freedom of speech, it means that there must be freedom of mind. And freedom of mind means there must be a freedom of your eyes to see. And that means if we are saying freedom of speech is another way of saying freedom of sight, then when one looks at what is here, the only the next place their sight goes is to the evolution of it. That means the most fascinating game on this planet cannot be sold in a store. The most fascinating game is a part of his participation with this science project called Humanity, that after 4 billion years, we are choosing to take a blind eye to. It's like a 10 to the civilization that has endured so far. You are the breath of humanity. Because it's the story we tell ourselves. That's the whole point of the mythology. When you look at ancient Greek mythology, they started out as gods. They started out as gods. Do you see that concept? They were gods from the beginning. They were their ability from the beginning. They didn't have a narrative of their ability being reduced, because in the religious mindset that cowers away in the minds of many human beings, it's a modality of perception that we descended, that we fell from heaven, that we took the wrong thing, the wrong choice, the wrong step, and we became part of the program of divine judgment. But when I look at life, there was a point before I spoke language, silence, and experience were the roaring clarity. And I find myself like, that's, I have this is a very blessed lifetime for me. But it is the greatest blessing was the retention of a memory, an experiential memory. Like, I remember the moment before I learned language. And in that moment, there was an identification with just image in awareness. There was no language, there was no time. It was just phenomena was being the moment. And then when we, individualize later on in our lives, we become individuals, that individualness separates us from, takes our attention away from how we're simultaneously being the image of the moment. We are being our wonder. We are being our vision. And the responsibility for vision is the path to an advanced civilization. You don't have to just see a world, you have to care enough to live in it, because we are not trees. I remember my father one day, like, if I can tell you something about me, is that in 2000, from 2013 to 14, 2012 to 14, I was wearing these Tibetan Buddhist beads, and I was literally like the most Tibetan Buddhist Persian guy. And I remember meditation was just, I would just find my parents would see that uh, yeah, 2012. It was I was living the life of a monk in a society that valued the opposite of one, you know, in an environment that didn't care. So the moment you care for something that the status quo doesn't acknowledge, you're uncommon. So literally, the word weird is another way of saying the person's attention is wired differently. The way the intelligence of that being is occurring is has the uniqueness of the geometry of their DNA. And so, my father, I was talking to him. He told me how he saw monks, you know, in the airport, and they were just sitting on the ground. And for a second, my father told me that it was like these monks that meditate are like trees. It's like they do nothing. They're just like trees, you know. And at the time, I still had some sort of, spiritualized ego, and I was like, Dad, come on, the insight that these people have attained is next level. But it took me a while to realize, wait a minute, if we are designed differently than a tree, our lifetime shouldn't have the same outcome as a tree. That means we have an ability to contribute to something larger than ourselves. Many beings in nature, they have no ability. They're just a program happening. We are a program that is happening and is conscious of itself. Hence the uniqueness of, like, yo, are we souls? The body asked the mind if it's the soul, and if the mind said yes, it would not exist. So the mind said no. We are eternity in temporary making, or we are the temporary state or expression of an eternal energetic cause. That means that I remember, like, I once looked at played around with a flashlight in a dark room in my youth, and it was very fascinating because the moment you would turn on the flashlight, there was a universe of visibility. The moment you would turn off the flashlight, it would there would that universe of visibility went away, and it was kind of like sleep was this on and off of wakefulness. And so it is wakefulness that is crucial to the way the fabric of intelligence occurs, because the wakefulness that one finds in a dream they remember the next day, that wakefulness is a different texture. In that wakefulness, your mind was being your body in that dream state. But in the wakeful state, your body is being your mind. So when you're awake right now as I'm speaking to you, it tends to be that the body moves, then the mind projects. But eventually that can become simultaneous, instantaneous. But in the dream state, the mind is moving, then your body can potentially move. And I'm telling you, the mind works in spheres. That means the way the mind is giving off waves is spherical. And the reason it's spherical, because it's like the subjective containment. Every story is like this sphere that this creature is creating around it. And when the sphere, like a bubble, breaks, it's as if the thoughts were never there, and then the evocational relationship with language develops. So, anyways, guys, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I wish, hopefully one day I'll find myself on a public stage where I can interact with people in person. But it's if anybody has questions about the topics discussed, you can share right now as a kind of like Q&A segment. If you care enough. If not, then it's all good. Yeah. The world and our eyes are spinning in one moment. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful. Namaste. Namaste. No, I'm joking. Much blessings and namaste.